Hello, and welcome to the 6th edition of the LoJoWo podcast. I'm recording this episode on Wednesday, August 12th, so the day after that great game that went down to the wire between the Mavs and the Blazers, where Damian Lillard dropped 61 points and clutched the game. Really just one of the more entertaining games I've seen all season. Stakes were high for both these teams, definitely higher for Portland, but, Mavs wanted this game too really bad because they're kind of fighting for that 6th spot in the West. If you're a Mavs fan, you'd much rather face Denver in the first round than the Clippers. Not just because the Clippers are better than the Nuggets, which, I will concede that point, but also just because of fit. I think the Clippers are, the team in the West that really just most resemble the Mavs' worst nightmare. I think with a guy as talented as Luka, having two tremendous top 5 wing defenders opposing him in Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, and really just the whole outlook of that team. Montrezl Harrell being a great guy to defend Porzingis in the post, really stocky, lower center of gravity, can really push and move the taller Porzingis around down there in the paint. Really aggressive too, so plays a lot taller than he is. Fights for a lot of rebounds and stuff like that. Really good defensive center. I think Dallas almost has a bit of a death sentence in the first round if they're a 7 seed and Clippers are the 2nd seed. So that's going to be interesting to see. This Dallas Mavericks team is really talented though, so anything could happen. But Clippers are really not the team that they would want to face just with the outlook of both those teams. So they had that incentive going for them, trying to pass Utah to get that 6th spot, and then Portland obviously trying to make the playoffs, trying to get that 8 seed, mainly wanting to get the advantage in the play-in tournament in the double elimination game. Having the advantage of only having to win one of those games, being in the 8 seed, is going to be huge for whichever team gets it, and it looks like Portland has a pretty good chance of clinching that this week. So these seeding games have been very interesting. I think maybe a little bit different than people expected, just because a lot of these, the contenders that we were looking at before, a lot of them just seem to not really care too much about these games, which makes sense. They're kind of just using it to figure out lineups and rest their guys and stuff like that, kind of use it as preseason a bit. But then these teams that are fighting for the playoffs, or and seeding too, the teams that do care about seeding, I think is very entertaining. And I think that, going forward, I think that this is a pretty good testament to this is going to be a pretty good example to point to in making a case for why the NBA should start doing play-in tournaments just in general in playoff years. Doing, what's been proposed now for the past several seasons is to have the 7th and 8th seed in both conferences for the playoffs be clinched by a play-in tournament where the 7 seed plays the 10 seed and the 8 seed plays the 9 seed, similar to how they're doing the play-in this time where the, higher seed gets the advantage of only having to win one game. I think that's going to be something very entertaining to see if they do decide to start doing that, and I think that this year really just brings us even closer to that being a reality. So, yeah, I'm excited for that. Before I move on any further, I should probably mention all this college football stuff that's going on. I don't pay attention too much to college football, but I do live in Nebraska, so it is a very, very important thing to everyone around me. I don't have any opposition to it or anything like that. I do watch Nebraska football games throughout the season. Don't watch too much college football other than that. But, kind of maybe focusing in more on, sports and doing this as a hobby, doing podcasts and stuff like that. I probably will start paying more attention to more sports and stuff that I just wasn't as interested in before. But obviously the big news with college football is a lot of these, is some of these conferences canceling the season, one of them being the BIG10. I think the University of Nebraska is really the only school so far that has spoken out in opposition to this decision by the BIG10. It sounds like a lot of these other schools are supporting this decision that they've made, but Nebraska just wants to play football. And I've heard quite a few quotes from Scott Frost, the head coach, on this topic and a lot of stuff that he said. And one of those being for college kids, playing sports could be the safest environment, probably is the safest environment for them to be in this pandemic, just because they're going to be going through rigorous medical examinations and getting tested and going through all these protocols to stay clean and safe and stuff like that. They're probably going to be taking much more care of themselves when they have a motivation of staying healthy, like for a season for playing in a football game. These are college kids. Outside of this, they're probably not taking too many precautions, I'd assume, with a lot of them. So I do like his position on that. I do kind of agree with that. It's kind of like with the NBA bubble, what they've been doing. Like, the main argument against the NBA bubble right now is that players can't see their families and stuff like that. But, they're choosing to do this, and they do have financial incentive to play, to continue the season and all that. But it can't be any less safe than they would be in normal life as far as the pandemic is concerned. So I just don't really see that as much of a reason for not doing this. Having the concern of health and safety for the pandemic and for coronavirus and everything. Like I said, most of these players are probably going to be taking much more care of themselves if they have a sport to worry about, and that on top of medical staff and people that are watching over them, and they that is their job to ensure their health and safety and everything like that. So yeah, I definitely do see and support his point there. And I did hear little talks of Nebraska maybe leaving the Big 10 and going and joining the Big 12 because they're still planning on playing a season, which will be interesting. Nebraska left the Big 12 back in I don't remember, 09, 2010, somewhere around there, I think. So that'll be interesting to see if Nebraska does leave the Big 10 and goes and joins the Big 12 again, just to play a football season. I'm kind of rooting for that to happen just because I think with sports that you don't really pay the most attention to, you kind of want the craziest, wildest, most entertaining things to happen with them just because, you don't really pay attention to them much, otherwise. So, that might be a little bit of the reasoning why I would like to see Nebraska pull this off, leave the Big 10 and go join the Big 12 to have a football season this year. But it'll be interesting to see where that goes, where Nebraska does finally fall and decide on what to do with this season. But yeah, all I know is lots of people in Nebraska are going to be very, very upset about it. I think Nebraska, compared to most states, during this COVID-19 pandemic, haven't really treated it as seriously as other states. I think Nebraska is a lot less worried about the threat of COVID as a whole, for the most part. Whether you agree with that or not is up to you. But yeah, all I know is a lot of people are going to be mad. Husker football is a beloved tradition. It's like a religion here in Nebraska. So a lot of people would freak out a little bit over that. Just wanted to interject in here a little bit. I'm recording this 2 days later, so on Friday, August 14th. While I was editing this podcast, news came out from Nebraska. Nebraska released a statement saying that we will not leave the Big 10, that they're for sure going to be staying in the Big 10 and I guess not playing a schedule because the Big 10 won't let them, but they still stand by their opinion or still stand by their statement of saying that they're disappointed in the decision that the Big 10 has made. So, they kind of laid to rest any rumors of them switching conferences. So I guess that's not really going to go anywhere. But also, my friend Jacob Roth, he released an episode the other day. He hasn't been very active on his podcast recently, but he's kind of starting it up again on YouTube over at the Jacob Roth Show. And he, in his first episode back, talked quite a bit about this as well. And he's much more into football and college football and all that stuff than I am. And I think that he's going to be covering this quite a bit better than me, just because, it's more important to him. So if you guys want to hear updates and stuff about that, go listen to his podcast. He'll do a great job talking about stuff like that. But yeah, just thought I would throw this in there. But yeah, I'll let you guys get back to the podcast I recorded on Wednesday. So back to the NBA. So the Kings and the Pelicans have both been eliminated from the play-in. They cannot make the playoffs at this point, too much ground to make up. So that's definitely sad to see that storyline ending with the Pelicans, with JJ Redick, his 13 straight seasons of making the playoffs in this league. And I think I also heard this from somebody, so I don't know if it's true or not, but I heard that, he made the tournament every year with Duke, which I definitely believe, the NCAA tournament every season that he was at Duke. And then also he made the playoffs, state playoffs every year with his high school basketball team. So basically ever since his freshman year of high school, he has not missed the postseason, and this is the first year that's happening. So that is a pretty crazy first for him. It's kind of a little bit sad to see, but everything has to come to an end sometime. And then the Spurs, who I don't think are completely eliminated yet, but I have to check. Let's see. Yeah, so the Spurs could make it into the 9 seed if they win tomorrow, I think is when they play. Yeah, they play tomorrow, Thursday, against the Jazz. So that's definitely, a conceivable win for them. But so if they win tomorrow and the Suns and the Grizzlies both lose their games, which the Suns only have one more game and Memphis also only has one more game. So if Memphis and Phoenix both lose their last game and then the Spurs win their game tomorrow, Then it'll be the Spurs in there at the 9 seed going up against the Blazers in the play-in. So that's cool. So, it could still happen for Pop, for him to get his 23rd. I believe in one of the last episodes when I was talking about the Spurs, I think it was last episode. I believe in the last episode when I was talking about the Spurs, I said this would be their 22nd consecutive playoff appearance. I'm pretty sure that was wrong. I'm pretty sure it's actually the 23rd consecutive, which, is a record. I believe the 22nd, that they already have the record at 22 consecutive playoff appearances. But, that would be awesome for Greg Popovich to, extend his, extend that streak and really solidify, his legacy as an all-time coach in this league. And then obviously Suns in there at 10, Grizzlies in there at 9. They have the same amount of wins and losses, but Grizzlies have the tiebreaker. If Suns win their last game and Grizzlies lose, then that means Suns are in here at the 9 spot. Grizzlies definitely could win that game against the Bucks, being that head coach Taylor Jenkins was Mike Budenholzer's assistant coach in Atlanta. And the Bucks have nothing to lose. Mike Budenholzer might do his old employee, his old assistant coach, a solid and let him into the playoffs or let him into the play-in. So we might see that happen. Who knows? But that'll be interesting to see. Portland's last game is against the Nets, which I think you can chalk that up for a W, especially because, Blazers do really want to hold on to this 8 spot because that's going to be huge for them going into this play-in. And the Suns play the Mavericks. So, that was a close game. They've already played in these seeding games, and that was a really close game. I think it was 117-115, went down to the wire. Mavericks have looked a little bit better, I think, in the last few games, but that just might be me. That's definitely a game to watch for sure. I think this is just the best. Really entertaining to see all these teams right here in the same spot competing, and it's really just coming down to these last games. Each one of these teams' final game in the seeding games to decide where they end up and who gets in to the play-in tournament. And, it is only going to be the 8 and 9 seed playing in the double elimination games, I do believe. It doesn't matter how close the 10 seed is to the 9 seed. It's if you have the 9 spot, you're the one entering the play-in. I did mention that in the last episode that I was wondering on, if the 10 seed is also, right there, super close within four games of the 8 seed, do they get to enter the play-in tournament as well? I do believe the answer to that is no. It's only the 9 seed. So, there is that hard cutoff after the 9 seed. You have to be in there to make the play-in. I keep my pick, though, that I predicted last episode, that the Blazers are going to be the one to represent the 8 seed in the West. Portland is also the team that I'd like most to get in here. I think Spurs are a close second, followed by Suns, and then Grizzlies fourth is, I think, how I'd rank them. I don't have anything against Memphis at all. I think they're just a couple years too early. They're a very, very young team with plenty of years to go in the future. I think their time will come where they're, a perennial playoff team in this Western Conference. I think that could happen. I feel like the Suns have been waiting longer, being, down there at the bottom of the West for the past several years, getting like top 5 lottery picks every season. Devin Booker's been there for a number of years now, putting together 20-win seasons, and I think, Tides are starting to turn in their favor this season. So I would pick Suns over Grizzlies to see them in there, just personally. And Blazers, number one, just because I think it's the most interesting scenario for the Western Conference playoffs to have Blazers versus Lakers first round, just because, what we've seen from the Lakers so far in these seeding games has been really shaky. And, what the thing that we have seen is teams with shifty scoring point guards and size to throw at Anthony Davis down low to make life hard for him are the teams that are beating the Lakers. The Lakers you can't handle teams like that, it seems, so far. The Blazers don't have any answer for LeBron, I would say. They don't have anybody that would really, I think, do a great job guarding LeBron one-on-one. I think it would be really interesting to see Melo guard him. I know, Melo's he's far from an elite defender, that's for sure. But I think that it would be a pretty cool storyline to see them go kind of one-on-one a bit. And I think it's just going to be an interesting series to see, without Rondo, without Bradley, and really just relying on Caruso and kind of KCP to guard Dame and CJ the whole game, the whole series even. I think that's just kind of a really hard ask for them. And Nurkic and Collins, being solid defensive presence in the paint. Whiteside, being able to provide that from time to time as well, just to make life hard for Anthony Davis and those other big guys that they have in there, JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard, I think is really just a recipe for success against the Lakers. It'll be a very interesting series to see. I think that it's definitely going to be a tough series for the Lakers. I wouldn't necessarily pick the Blazers to win a series of 7 against them, but they would make it interesting. I think it's definitely the highest possibility for an upset out of all of these teams to make it in there at the 8 seed. The Blazers could be the third best team in the Western Conference. I think they do belong probably talent-wise, in that 3-6 range now that they have that core back of Nurkic and Collins with Dame and CJ, and now, Melo. So, yeah, I do think Mavs are going to stay here at the 7th seed probably. Phoenix has been on a tear, 7-0. They're going to be a hard team to beat. And then, for the Jazz, I think the Spurs are going to be, a decent challenge to beat. And, if the Mavs lose and the Jazz lose, they both, obviously they stay in that same spot, 6-7. What the Mavs need to happen is for them to beat the Suns and then Jazz to beat the Spurs, which I think is the least likely out of all those scenarios. But obviously still within the realm of possibility, definitely could happen. But even if they do, Mavs would be 44-31 and Jazz would be 43-29, which I believe it just goes by win percentage, not the amount of wins that you have. So let me see if that would even be enough. Yeah, so even if the Jazz lose and end up 43-29 and the Mavericks win and end up 44-31, then win percentage wise, Mavs would still be behind the Jazz. So I do think the Mavs are actually technically locked in here at the 7th spot, which means we're most likely going to see a Nuggets Jazz first round. And that brings me right into Nuggets corner. Obviously I'm a Nuggets fan. For those of you who haven't listened to the previous episodes, have been my entire basketball watching life. So watching the Nuggets so far in these seeding games, I've been really excited with just what a revelation MPJ and Bol have been for our team. It just makes me really excited for the future. Both of those guys are guys with an injury, a pretty injury-riddled history, kind of, iffy on that front. That's really the main reason both of them fell to Denver in the draft. But, I just kind of love this idea of, Jokic being a second-round pick, Bol, I think was the 44th pick in the draft, and I think Jokic was the 43rd. MPJ was the 14th, which still a lottery pick, but he was projected to go first, I think, at the beginning of the season. And, his back injury and all that kind of stuff is really what made him drop all the way to Denver in the draft. So if, all three of those guys, Jokic has obviously panned out so far. And, if MPJ continues to play at, the level that he has been, and Bol, who's showing flashes of a really special player, if he pans out, even a little bit, that's just going to be something super special. Bol is somebody that I didn't really pay too much attention to while he was in college. I saw highlights and stuff like that, but I never really sat down and watched a game of Bol or anything like that. Somebody that I knew in school here in Nebraska when I was going to high school. I actually played with him at a camp in Kansas when they were in junior high. So I've known about him for a long time, ever since he was in junior high. Something that I never really noticed before or never really thought about was his facilitating and playmaking ability. Is something that I never knew about. But, seeing him in these seeding games, just some of the passes, full court passes, or he throws really interesting, like, overhand bounce passes, like half length of the court and stuff like that. That seemed to be really just on target and really mesmerizing. Very interesting to see, especially with his body type, how long and, lengthy he is. Having that kind of touch on a pass is something that's just kind of mind-blowing. As unconventional as his shot looks, how consistent it seems to be so far is something, that's a really good sign. Bol has just showed a lot more skill than I thought that he possessed. I always knew he was a really tall guy who had, somewhat of jump shot range and stuff like that. But, man, he just seems to be a really special, skilled player so far from what I've seen from him. And, I'm really excited about what he could turn into be. And I was excited when we first picked him in the draft last season just because I was all for it. We have already a deep roster. Picking somebody that, a lot of people were thinking was going to go higher, that's somebody that has a lot of potential, a lot of, untapped talent that people were looking at coming into the draft, falling all the way to 44th. I just thought was a great pick to make. Same thing with MPJ. Nuggets had a pretty solid roster in that draft as well. Picking MPJ just seemed like a no-brainer. And so, I think that's huge for the Nuggets where they're taking these risks and it's panning out. at least so far is what it seems. But Michael Porter Jr., yeah, I think that in this bubble so far, he's just been incredible. In an episode before, I touched on that a little bit with just how all of his skills are really enhanced by having a guy that facilitates from the center of the floor like Jokic can. Just the off-ball talent that Michael Porter Jr. is, always being alert and cutting, diving to the rim for offensive rebounds, being a tremendous floor stretcher and spot-up shooter, has been really just the perfect pairing with Jokic so far. I think it just makes Jokic's skills better, and it makes MPJ's skills better, just having them in the same unit. So that's something that I'd love to see moving forward. Love to see MPJ locked down with a contract with the Nuggets, especially, after we see what he can do in these playoffs. If he's anywhere close to what he's shown so far, I think that would be a great decision to lock him down soon once he's eligible for an extension. I do believe, this is his second year on his contract, and he'll be entering his third year. So I think he should be available for an extension come next season. Yeah, and then skinny Jokic as well is something that's been interesting in the bubble. Jokic slimmed down, playing a lot faster pace, more like a guard. And I think part of that is due to the lineups that we've had out there with having Murray, Barton, and Harris out. Murray just came back a couple games ago, but I believe Barton and Harris are still out. I'm not sure exactly when they're going to be rejoining the team. They're in the bubble, but they're not eligible to play yet because they arrived late to Disney World, apparently. That is, I think, why we're seeing Jokic in more of a guard role, but it also could be due to the fact that he's slimmed down and can play that role a little bit better. But I think he's going to be also a really interesting player to watch come postseason. I was really happy with what I saw against the Jazz, what Jokic was still able to do to a guy like Gobert in the paint. Really still possessed those that post scoring prowess. Not so much of throwing his weight around like he has in the past, I think, in the Jazz game, although he did do that a little bit, but really just more of a sharpened footwork, having these back to the basket post moves that were really just incredible to see. Really looked like right out of the past with Hakeem Olajuwon or Kevin McHale type post moves. So that was cool to see, and really excited to see how Jokic performs this postseason, as well as Murray when he's kind of back in the groove of things, and then Barton and Harris once they come back as well. But yeah, I think that can be it for Nuggets Corner. I'll move on now. So yeah, rounding out the West, it does look like we're going to be having Lakers 1 seed, Clippers 2, Nuggets 3, Rockets 4, Thunder 5, Jazz 6, Mavericks 7, and I still think Blazers will be in there at 8. I do think that is how it's going to happen. I don't think we're going to be seeing much movement, but we could. I think Rockets and Thunder could technically swap around a bit, but I think it still will be them in that 4 or 5 spot. Just depends which one is which. That doesn't change the first round series at all. Rockets and Thunder I think will be a very interesting first round series, just in terms of team matchup as well as narrative and storyline. Obviously with Chris Paul and Russell Westbrook being traded with each other, definitely going to be something interesting to see Russ going up against his longtime franchise in OKC, and then Chris Paul and James Harden, old teammates, kind of going up against each other as well. I think will be a very interesting series. And then also, Thunder possessing a lot of good backcourt players. I think they're going to kind of like that they're not going to be giving up too much running out that 3-point guard lineup against the microball Rockets. So that'll be interesting to see as well. I think Nuggets and Jazz square up pretty good for a playoff series as well. I think Nuggets, I feel pretty good about the Nuggets' chances. I think that is probably my favorite way this could have ended up. I think the Jazz are still something to be dealt with, a threat to be dealt with in the West. That they could make some noise in a series. I think without Bogdanovich, they really do lose a ton of their bench depth and a lot of their options. So I think the Nuggets can handle that series. I'm pretty confident about that. But yeah, Mike Conley and that Jazz crew, though, has looked great. A lot of those players. Donovan Mitchell had a great game against the Nuggets the other night. And since I spent so much time talking about the West, I think I should probably talk about the East as well. The number one thing I want to talk about with the East is that I already did an episode. I think that it was the second episode of this podcast series that I talked about the three main contenders going into this bubble. Who everybody had, who the Las Vegas odds favored, the Bucks, Clippers, and the Lakers. I think a lot of people have changed their minds on who the top three is a little bit, or at least, that another team belongs up there with those three, and that is the Toronto Raptors. Toronto Raptors have looked fantastic in the bubble. They really look like they haven't missed a beat at all. It looks like they've been playing with each other, with their teammates this whole time that we've been off due to coronavirus. I think that is a little bit due to their early arrival in the bubble, them being allowed to be the first team in the bubble by a couple weeks, and being able to use the facilities there and everything. And that was just because with something to do with the migration laws in Canada or something that they had to come earlier. Raptors and Nick Nurse, Siakam, that whole crew, definitely something to watch in this playoffs. I really think that this whole season is kind of a wild card season. Like, there's so many teams that could do so much. Everything could go so many different ways. I think even more so than other seasons. There's not really a heavy favorite, and those teams that were heavy favorites before are really showing signs of weakness. I think Bucks and Lakers mostly have really shown the most signs of weakness. Clippers a little bit. There's been some criticisms of them and how they'll fare in the playoffs as well. But I think less so for them. I still think Clippers are the safest pick. Before I said that Lakers were my pick to win the championship, just because I think they have the highest ceiling. I believe in their ceiling the most, but I do believe that the Clippers are the safest pick to go with. I do still think I kind of agree with that. I think that the Lakers' chance for hitting their ceiling is a lot slimmer now from seeing what they've been doing in the seeding games, just because they seem to not be able to figure out what lineups work for them very well. KCP, I think, has been starting most of their games, and that really has been, I think, according to advanced metrics, has been like one of the worst lineups in the league in Disney World. So I think the smartest thing to do is something that I kind of said in that second episode when I was talking about the Lakers, is that they should start Caruso. I think that is going to be the best option for them, and that's what I would say they should do moving forward, but we'll see what they end up doing. But yeah, I think the Raptors, I think they should be thrown up here with those other three teams as being a main contender for this title. I think Celtics aren't too far behind that, and personally, I'd throw my Nuggets somewhere right outside that range as well. Maybe Heat would probably be the next one. But yeah, there's a lot of different, and Rockets obviously, just because of how high variance that team is. But yeah, I think those are really the main ones. I think Sixers are done, just because, that massive blow to their team that they took with Simmons being injured, and now Joel Embiid is struggling with a little bit of injury as well. But it'll be interesting to see if, just in terms of fit, they do fare a lot better in the playoffs without Simmons, just because, Simmons is a great player, but fit-wise, everything just makes a little bit more sense when it's a team more built around Embiid on the offensive end. I think defensively they will suffer a lot with not having Simmons there. So I predict that they lose first round, but I guess anything could happen. Pacers, I predict, would lose first round as well, unless TJ Warren is just still the bubble MVP, is still performing at the level that he is right now, which I feel like that has to slow down sometime with him, scoring in the 30s every game. And I think they showed that in the game the other night between Heat and Pacers. I think Butler is the guy to lock up TJ Warren in this little streak that he's having right now. He held him to 12 points, I believe. So that'll be a very entertaining series to see. And I do pick the Heat to come out on top in that. I might go over these a little bit more again once Friday comes, or once Saturday comes and all the seeds are locked in place. But just thought I'd probably give a little bit of a preview. Obviously Nets and Magic, they're not making it out of the first round. I think that goes without saying. Probably going to be sweeps, both of those series, but they at most they probably could push it to 5, maybe if they get lucky. But I think those are a done deal already. I think the second round in the East is going to be really interesting to watch, just because those top 4 teams I think is what's going to be there. The 4 teams left in the second round. It'll be Bucks, Heat, Raptors, Celtics. I think both of those series are going to be prime time, really good series to watch. Really excited for this season just because of the more equality and parity that there is across the league this season, without a favorite like Golden State has been the last several seasons. So yeah, I think that's really fun to see. Oh yeah, and then another East headline to talk about is Giannis being ejected from that Bucks Wizards game the other night. I think people are overreacting a little bit with it. I've always admired Giannis because of his competitive drive and, how passionate he gets on the floor. Obviously, I'm not condoning headbutting somebody, but I think when people call it, a full-blown headbutt or like super egregious and stuff like that, I think they're blowing it a little bit out of proportion. It kind of looked like he was kind of just charging up to him, didn't really throw his neck at him too hard or anything like that. Like, Giannis looked unfazed. It wasn't really much of a physical altercation, like seriousness wise on, how hurt Wagner was or anything, but obviously, uncalled for, and you shouldn't do that. And I do understand the 1 game suspension, like that, makes sense. Makes sense for him to get ejected. Makes sense for a 1 game suspension. But the only thing I would say is with, I think it's different than like with Draymond Green, where, in the finals a few seasons ago when he intentionally kicked LeBron James in the groin with his foot intentionally, and was given a technical foul and ejected from the game, and then suspended for the next game. A lot of people did think that he was suspended for the next game because of the foul, because of what he did, because he kicked LeBron. But he really was just suspended the next game because he hit that limit of 16 technical fouls in a season. And after you reach that point, you get suspended for a game. And so that was really just a coincidence. So it wasn't, the same thing. I think that was a little bit more egregious because you're really going after, a very sensitive part on a person during like a play, definitely trying to hurt him. Giannis was kind of just more of like aggressive, like kind of being pushy. Like, I don't know, like it really wasn't like a blow to anything, like he wasn't trying, it didn't look like he was really trying to cause him pain or hurt him, you know what I mean? So I think that is a little bit unfair when Draymond technically didn't get suspended for a game because of that, and Giannis gets suspended for a game because of the headbutt. I guess I don't really know exactly where I stand on that though, just because, this was a regular season game that he's getting suspended for, so it is a bit different than the finals, but I don't know if that should be a reason in how much you weigh it into a suspension for a game, like the time in the season it does come. But I guess I just think that people are overreacting a little bit with it. People freaking out a little bit too much over Giannis hitting his head against Mo Wagner. Yeah, I saw his comment after the game saying that it was nothing personal towards Wagner. He said it was a culmination, I think, the culmination of several dirty plays adding up and boiling over. But I wasn't watching that game, so I don't know. I don't really know the dirty plays that he's talking about leading up to it. Yeah, believe it or not, I was on vacation in Orlando, and I was not gonna make my family watch a game between the Bucks and the Wizards, who Wizards are not making the playoffs, and the Bucks have no reason to be caring about seeding games right now. So wasn't really on my vacation to-do list radar. But yeah, I think that will do it for the Eastern Conference. Now I'm going to move into season awards. The NBA has finalized their top 3 candidates for all the season awards and published those. So for the MVP, who we're going to be looking at for those 3 finalists are Giannis, LeBron, and Harden, which I wasn't really surprised by at all. If you go and listen to that, I believe it is the 3rd episode where I break down season awards, or where I break down the MVP race and everything. So if you want to hear my thoughts on all that and how I rank those players, go listen to that. In that episode, I did say that I could see Harden anywhere from the 3 to 6 range, I believe is what I said, where people rank him at the end of the season. For my personal ranking, I had him in the 5 to 7 range, just because I'm a little bit, I think, lower on Harden than other people are. But I definitely am higher on Harden than other Harden haters that I hear. So I am somewhere, I think, in the middle on that. But definitely was not surprised to see him in here at the 3rd spot. And I don't necessarily disagree with it either. He is an unbelievable offensive player. I think there are arguments to be made against him, which drops him a little bit more lower in the MVP race, in my opinion. I think that, though, if I were to redo it, I would give him a little bit more credit in being able to make a push for that 3 spot in my book. The people I did put above him were Kawhi and Luka, who I believe probably missed the cut for that 3rd spot, mainly because of the amount of games they played, is my guess, and really was what the tipping point was for them. and why Harden was ranked over them, which I totally understand and I could get along with also. But I did have Harden, I think, at the 6th spot in mine, but I definitely do not feel any type of way about him being ranked here at the 3rd spot. I'm totally fine with that. But other guys to be considered there, I think, are like Kawhi and Luka and Anthony Davis, Nikola Jokic. All those guys have had really good seasons. Damian Lillard. Another thing, while talking about the MVP, while I was on my trip in Colorado, I don't think I've talked about this in an episode. I know I recorded an episode since I came back from Colorado, but I don't think I talked about this. I was listening to the Bill Simmons podcast while I was in Colorado, and he shared his MVP ballot. He's a media member with a vote on these ballots, so he shared his picks for his MVP ballot. But who he had there was Giannis first, LeBron second, I believe Kawhi third is who he had third, which those were my top 3 as well. And then 4th he had Jokic, which I was a little bit surprised by, but I definitely appreciate it. I like seeing my guy that high, but I ranked Jokic in my MVP letter at 7th. So but I did explain in there a little bit how I am hesitant to rank my own players higher just because I'm afraid of being biased. But yeah, that was cool to see. And the reasons he gave for ranking him 4th was just that the Nuggets have had a really good season this year, and Jokic is really the only reliable option that they've had on the Nuggets team this entire season. So that was his reasoning for putting him as high as he did, which I respect. So just thought I'd mention that though. For the Defensive Player of the Year, finalists are Giannis Antetokounmpo, Anthony Davis, and Rudy Gobert are the top 3, which that's my top 3 as well. I think in the 4th episode, I break down the Defensive Player of the Year race and all defensive teams. So if you have not listened to that episode, you can go do that as well. Yeah, that is, I think, even the order that I have them. I don't think these were published in a certain order, but the way I just listed them was, I think, the way that they were listed on the published article that I read. Giannis 1, AD 2nd, and Rudy Gobert 3rd would probably be my order for my Defensive Player of the Year ballot. And if you want to hear the breakdown of that, yeah, like I said, go listen to that episode. And then Coach of the Year. I talked about Coach of the Year last episode, actually. And one thing I wanted to mention was I actually said last episode that they picked the Coach of the Year, which I don't know why I thought that. I read an article about the Coach of the Year. I think what it must have said was that it was the coaches ballot, like the coaches peer voting. So all the coaches across the league voted, and those were the finalists of who they voted for, was Billy Donovan and Mike Budenholzer. And just how weird this season has been and how unpredictable all this stuff, how they're going to handle all this stuff has been. I guess I just thought that for some reason I thought that was the finalists, or I thought that was who they were giving the award to, and they were doing a co-coach of the year. But yeah, so I apologize for that, for saying that that's who they gave the award to. But yeah, so apparently this is still going, the Coach of the Year race, just like these other ones. And the finalists for that are Mike Budenholzer, Billy Donovan, and Nick Nurse. So that is also, just like Defensive Player of the Year, that is also my top 3 that I give in my breakdown of the Coach of the Year race that I did last episode. And, the order I have them in, I think, was Nick Nurse, and then Billy Donovan and Mike Budenholzer. I guess Donovan and Budenholzer could kind of be flipped around either way for me, but I think Nick Nurse is Coach of the Year in my book. So cool to see there as well, the top 3 fitting along with my top 3. And then Sixth Man of the Year. I have not broken down the Sixth Man of the Year yet. I just realized that. I think I did record a little bit of a breakdown of it, but it hasn't made its way into a podcast yet. And I think it was on my older mic too, so I'll probably just talk about it now. But yeah, so the finalists for are Dennis Schroeder, Montrezl Harrell, and Lou Williams. And I don't think that was my exact top 3, but it very well could have been. I don't remember who my third guy was, but my top 2 were definitely Schroeder and Harrell. So, 2 of those guys were definitely in my top 2. And the guy that I have picked for Sixth Man of the Year is Dennis Schroeder. I just think what he's provided to this OKC team this season has been huge for them. Closing games for them, being really, that prototypical Sixth Man of the Year scorer off the bench. He's been really good for them this season. I think really something you could say about him is he's kind of out Lou Will this season. He's done what Lou Will has made a career out of the last few seasons as, coming off the bench, being an ISO scorer in that second unit, and also closing games with the starting unit. I think that Schroeder has just done a better job than Lou Will this season at his own game. But, I think Lou Will is definitely a worthy candidate for this award as well. Definitely worth mentioning. So I'm fine with him being there at the third spot. Harrell, I do think is definitely the second spot, and I wouldn't lose any sleep over anybody picking him first either. Him versus Schroeder, they provide very different things. Schroeder is very much more of like what I said, a prototypical off-the-bench scorer, and Harrell is much more of a defensive energizer, rebounder, blocker, pick-and-roll threat type of player that comes off the bench and plays in the closing unit as well, alongside Lou Williams on this Clippers team. So, obviously what Harrell has provided for the Clippers this season has been huge as well. I think Schroeder's played a little bigger of a role on his team, though, is why I picked him. Played more minutes, I think had bigger crunch time moments. So overall, in my book, I just personally would pick Schroeder as winning Sixth Man of the Year. My prediction is definitely between those two of who will win it. I would be a little bit more surprised if Lou Will wins it over those two this season, but definitely could happen. Some other guys that I think are worth mentioning for Sixth Man of the Year are like Jordan Clarkson, Buddy Hield. If he would have played the whole season coming off the bench, he started to towards the end of the season, and he was phenomenal coming off the bench. Davis Bertans, some other guys. I can't think of very many more right now. There's probably some very obvious ones I'm forgetting, but these three, I'm really okay with that being the final three. Most improved player, I think this one is probably the deepest award in this entire season. I think even deeper than MVP is and Coach of the Year, which I think MVP and Coach of the Year are also super deep. But most improved player, there's a lot of different ways that you can go with this. The three finalists are Bam Adebayo, Luka Doncic, and Brandon Ingram, which I think all three of those guys are deserving of top three for this award. And all of those guys are guys that I would even consider, making a case for being number one. But, there's just so many more guys that, have such good cases as well, like Domantas Sabonis and Devontae Graham, Davis Bertans, Trae Young, and guys like that. And I might be forgetting more on this one again. But, one thing with this award that I've heard people talk about is, some people who vote for this award don't like to vote for second-year players just because they believe that they are exempt from being candidates for this award just because you're supposed to really step up a lot between your first and second season. That's kind of just expected, and it's kind of unfair to be putting players in here that are playing their second year in the league just because that's where you see the most growth. But I don't really know where I stand on that issue, whether those players should be eligible for this award or not. So I guess if it is, or if I am going by that rule and I am eliminating second year players, I think I would definitely probably go with Brandon Ingram on this one. I honestly kind of think Domantas Sabonis might have a better case for being in the top three than Bam Adebayo does, just because Bam was, I don't know, last season I thought Bam was better than Sabonis, and this season I think they're about the same. So I guess it's pretty easy to track when you think of it that way. I think Sabonis has stepped up a lot this season. But, if I'm not playing by that rule and I can vote in, or I can choose a player that is in their second year, I think I would choose Luka Doncic as the most improved player. Just because of how phenomenal of a season he's had this year. Really, like last season, he had a good rookie season. He had a really good rookie season. But this season has just been like 3 or 4 steps up. Like it seems like this is like his 25, 26, like 28-year-old season. Like one of his, like something that would be the best season of his career. Like last season, if you're just thinking about this as like go back in time and think about it from when Luka Doncic just finished his rookie season, and somebody came up to you and showed you the numbers that he put up this season, and told you, Luka Doncic will do this in a future season. Which season do you think that is? I honestly don't think anybody would assume that was his second season. I think most people would assume that was like probably the best season of his career. That was like I said, somewhere up in his prime years, like 27, 28, something like that. But he did this at the age of 20, 21, which is just ridiculous, and was really just leaps and bounds ahead of where he was last season. And that's saying a lot just because, people were really entranced by the rookie season that he did put together last year. Showed a lot of promise, a lot of flashes of, what a good player he could be in the future. But this season, I think he's just been, he's been beyond what anybody could have ever imagined, him being so quickly. Yeah, I think Luka would be, the number one choice for me for the most improved player if we are including second year players. And then I'll move on to Rookie of the Year. I wanted to touch on Rookie of the Year race before I went on to the all-rookie teams, just because I wanted to get something out of the way. And that is the Ja versus Zion debate. And you guys can't see me right now, but I did just do air quotes while I said the word debate, just because I really don't think this is a debate at all. And, I know I said something along those same lines with MVP, with Giannis versus LeBron, but this is even farther than that. This isn't even close. Just because Zion, for me, is completely eliminated from even my all-rookie teams. I didn't even put him on all-rookie teams just because I didn't feel comfortable doing it. Like, I think that Zion is a tremendous player, and just with the sample size that we have seen from him, he is the best rookie. But, that isn't what this award is necessarily. This is the Rookie of the Year, which rookie had the best season, So you have to go by, like, the entire body of work that they put together across this entire season. Similar to MVP and All-NBA voting, it's the same thing, just with rookies, Zion Williamson was tremendous, and he has wildly unpredictable potential. He has a very high ceiling, as high as anybody that you can think of, but injuries and everything is obviously a huge concern with him. He just has a large margin of where his career could end up. He has a timeline where he could be the best player ever, somewhere along those lines. I believe that is possible for him. I guess that is within the realm of possibility for his ceiling. And then for his floor, he could not put together a game or a season higher than 30 games. We don't know. That's just the interesting thing with him. He has to have a rookie season, not just 19 games to, really show and make a case for being a Rookie of the Year. And I don't have anything against Zion at all. Believe me. That's how I would feel if it was the other way around. If Ja only played 19 games and Zion played 50 whatever, 60 whatever Ja played, then, I would feel the same way. I wouldn't put Ja on any of my all-rookie teams. So, with that said, the NBA's top 3 for Rookie of the Year was something that didn't surprise me at all, and that was Ja Morant, Zion Williamson, and Kendrick Nunn. Those were the top 3 that I would have predicted. I could have also seen Brandon Clark being in there over Nunn, or even over Zion. I wasn't really sure where Zion was going to end up, just because I knew that he was going to lose definitely a lot of voters just because of how small of a season he had. But I do believe a lot of people just kind of disqualified him from the number 1 spot and still put him at the 2nd spot just because of how tremendous he was this season, which I can respect. I can understand how you do that. It just really doesn't vibe and mesh with my thought process of picking these teams. So yeah, my top 3 personally would probably be Ja, Kendrick Nunn, and Brandon Clark would be my top 3 for Rookie of the Year. And that's not to say that any of those guys are better than Zion Williamson. They just had better overall seasons, and that's why they are higher on the Rookie of the Year ladder. Yeah, so I'll just read off my all-rookie teams now. And for those of you who haven't listened to the previous episodes where I've done these NBA teams, how the voting is done. They do 2 guard spots, 2 forward spots, and a center spot. The order of the guard spots is solely based on which player gets more votes than the other player. It has nothing to do with which one's more of a point guard, which one's more of a shooting guard, or which one's more of a small forward, power forward, anything like that. It's just whoever gets more votes to be up there. So this is going to be me ranking them and who I have higher than the other one. So that being said, my first guard is Ja Morant, and my second guard is Kendrick Nunn. And then my first forward on my All-NBA or on my All-Rookie first team is Terrence Davis. My second forward is Matisse Thybulle, and my center is Brandon Clark. So the NBA being very versatile in how they are categorizing players by position this season, I think that Brandon Clark will be eligible to be put in there as a center, a small ball 5. So that's where I put him on their All-Rookie team, mainly just because of the lack of centers in this rookie class that really deserve a spot on these teams. Much more guards and forwards in this all-rookie class. So, Terrence Davis and Matisse Thybulle, some people might not like me putting them on my first team, but I really think that, just like with the Zion thing, I'm not saying that Terrence Davis and Matisse Thybulle are better players necessarily, like overall, like more talented or anything like that than these guys on the all-rookie second team. Because some of these guys that are on worse teams, they have better potential of being more ISO scorers, like better shot creators and people that can be the number 1 option on a team. These guys, Matisse Thybulle and Terrence Davis, you're really looking more at just normal role or rotation players for a team. But this season, they've proved to be very valuable ones at that, especially for rookies, just being very impressive. Most rookies do not have seasons like they had, stepping in and being guys that do all the dirty work, like things. Not being like a talented spectacle using the ball in their hands, them really being good spot-up shooters, especially Terrence Davis being one of the best spot-up shooters in the league, really, this season, and both of them playing just tremendously on the defensive end of the floor, especially for rookies, showing high levels of experience in that aspect without really having any is just something that really pushed them over the top for me, and doing this on winning teams as well, especially, Terrence Davis being on the third best team in the NBA with the Raptors, and Matisse Thybulle being on the Sixers, who are a very talented team as well. These guys haven't played as many minutes as the guys on my second team, so I could see people, making the argument of saying that and putting, these other guys over them, just in terms of, they meant more to their team or they played more minutes, and stuff like that. I can definitely concede to that argument, but I also just think that their impact in a rotation on a good team has been something that's just been really impressive, and I think deserving of an all-rookie first-team case, at least. So, and really kind of did it for me today on where I'm placing these guys. So, and Brandon Clark, him and Ja on this Grizzlies team have been really good. Brandon Clark has one of the best floaters in the NBA, really. He's really perfected that throughout his college career and everything. So that'll be really interesting to see the player that he develops into. He's really super bouncy rim runner, can play defense, or very switchable on defense as well. And then, and he has a lot of finesse and touch close to the basket. So he's a very interesting player to watch as well. Then John Morant, obviously don't need to go too much into him. He's the guy I picked for Rookie of the Year. He really reminds me a lot of, when Derrick Rose or Russell Westbrook or John Wall were in their rookie seasons. But I think even better, at least in terms of turnovers and everything. He's played it really safe this season, had a really steady hand. Really impressive for a rookie to be that efficient and have that low of a turnover rate as well. Just a spectacle to see. Super athletic, tenacious point guard, attacks the rim with passion and without any regard for his or anybody else's safety, it seems like. So he's a very fun player to watch, very talented as well. I think hit the three ball better this season than most people were expecting him to coming into the NBA. So we'll see if that keeps up as well. And then Kendrick Nunn was the other guard on my first team that I haven't talked about yet. He really came out of nowhere this season. He was on the G League Warriors, or he was on the Warriors G League team, I believe, last season. I think he's like 24, 25 years old. He's really been a scrappy guy, playing really well this season. Really does a little bit of everything. Can shoot the three, stretch the floor, attack the basket, facilitate, be, a little bit of a ball handler as well. Really just plays a really good and important role on this Miami Heat team, and it's going to be big for them going into this postseason as well. Onto my all-rookie second team. My first guard on my all-rookie second team, so my third rookie guard in the league, is Tyler Hero. My second guard is RJ Barrett. My first forward is PJ Washington. And my second forward is Rui Hachimura. And then my center on my all-rookie second team is Eric Paschall. Tyler Hero has been super impressive this season. Really reminds me a lot of like a Jamal Crawford type of player. Wild circus shots, a heat check scorer, really just impressive shooter, playmaker, ball handler, all that kind of stuff. Really impressive this season. So I'm a big fan of Tyler Hero. His passion, his competitive drive, his swagger that he carries with him all the time. Just a super confident shooter, scorer. Somebody that really fits this Miami culture, I think. And it's going to be really interesting to see his career going forward as well. And I think really deserving of all-rookie team selection. And then my second guard, like I said, was RJ Barrett. I think this season has been very unfair to RJ Barrett just because of the fit and where he's developing right now with the New York Knicks. Like I said in another episode, this New York Knicks team really has no rhyme or reason to its fit, like its roster personnel, it's the makeup of this roster. The system and everything is a really hard one to really fit into and find your role in, especially as a rookie with no NBA experience. But RJ Barrett has shown some flashes this season of being a very capable shot maker and even facilitator, and he's shown that he might have at least the groundwork to put together a reliable three-point shot. So I think that RJ Barrett will live up to being that a top 5 pick from this past draft. I really do believe in a future for RJ Barrett, but in these first few seasons with the Knicks, it's going to be hard to really see much, I think, growth for him. I think culture change or team change would be probably the best thing imaginable for RJ Barrett right now. But yeah, PJ Washington was my first forward. PJ Washington being picked, I think, somewhere in the late lottery, like 12 or something like that. I don't remember exactly. In the draft to the Charlotte Hornets out of Kentucky. And when that pick was made, I did kind of make fun of it. Not based on how good of a player PJ Washington was, but like just the type of players that the Hornets seem to keep picking every year, which are just like 6'7", 6'8" wings. They kind of have too many of them at this point. And especially when they picked him, they still had Michael Kidd-Gilchrist on their roster, And I think Marvin Williams and Dwayne Bacon, I believe, were all there. And, they just picked Miles Bridges last draft. I think they had somebody else too. I can't remember. But just the fit with the pick I thought was going to be really weird. And I had a lot of doubts for this Hornets team also coming into the season, which they've kind of outperformed what I thought they were going to do this season. So they've been impressive. And PJ Washington has been a big part of that as well, being, a reliable floor stretcher for them, knockdown, 3-point shooter. Also been a kind of a heat check guy as well. I think had some like high 20-point games, 29, somewhere in there. I think I saw a few games like that from him. And yeah, so I think that he's been a good part of this overachieving Hornets team this season. I think was deserving of a rookie second team spot. Rui Hachimura, I think same could be said for some of those reasons I just listed off for PJ Washington. Hachimura is on a Wizards team, I think, that overachieved a bit this season. Being a rookie, I think showing some promise on the defensive end. Wasn't like a great defender this season, but is definitely showing some promise in that department. And really just playing hard for this Wizards team, being a vital part of that rotation. Hachimura has been. So yeah, I think that he deserved a nod for this spot as well. And then Eric Paschall was my center with the Warriors. He was one of the few bright spots on this Warriors team this entire season. He'll be interesting to see going forward what he can do. Was showing a bit of promise, some flashes this season of a reliable NBA player, can score, can rebound, facilitate a bit. Some people calling him like the next Draymond Green and stuff like that. But yeah, it'll be interesting what Eric Paschall does in the future. So those were all the season awards. I just broke down those a bit, just the results of those and also some of the ones I hadn't touched on yet. And then one thing I also wanted to talk about was I heard that, so the NBA is actually going to do bubble awards as well for these seeding games. They're going to, I think, do an MVP award and All-NBA teams, 2 of them, for these bubble games, which I don't know if I like the idea of that very much. I think it'll be fun, but I don't know why they really need to do that. Maybe just increase the engagement of it a little bit. But predictions I have, I guess, for MVP, I think Damian Lillard at this point. I think he deserves it. Obviously, there's still 1/8 of the season left to go. 1/8 of the bubble season, regular season left to go. But I think Dame so far has been really the guy that's been carrying the Portland Trail Blazers to this playoff spot. He just dropped 61 last night. I think he had 51 the game before that. Has had some really big games this bubble. And then the other guy I would also talk about is Devin Booker for being MVP. Really, a lot of the same reasons is carrying his team to playoff contention. And scoring at a high rate, really proving a lot of his doubters wrong, that he is capable of being a winning player in this league. At least he's doing that a little bit. He's on a 7-game winning streak, which I guess isn't like a ton, and also he's been playing against some good teams that are resting a lot of their players and stuff like that. But he also has come up huge in some really close big games with big competition as well, like against the Clippers, hitting that game-winning shot and stuff like that. So I think Devin Booker is also deserving of a MVP candidacy for this little bubble season. But yeah, those would probably be my 2 main picks. Maybe if you want to be really funky and say TJ Warren, that'd be funny, just because the weird scoring outings that he's had. I doubt that he'll win it, but I think his name definitely will come up with it for sure, just because of the weird time that he's had in this bubble. But I do believe TJ Warren will end up on one of the all bubble teams for sure. He's going to be on there. But yeah, that'll be interesting to see what ends up on those awards. Yeah. So here I am recording another little interjection, just because of all the things that have changed in the bubble the last couple days between when I recorded this on Wednesday and now, which is Friday. I just got done recording and adding that interjection you heard earlier at the beginning of the podcast with the Nebraska football season cancellation type stuff. But just thought I would update you guys on some of the things that have happened and some of the things I might have said 2 days ago that are kind of outdated now. One of those things being the play-in. And so it is final. The Blazers are the 8 seed for the play-in, and they're playing the Grizzlies as the 9 seed in double elimination for the Blazers. So they'll play that first game tomorrow on Saturday. And then if the Grizzlies win, then they'll play another game on Sunday. And yeah, so my pick is still going to stay Blazers. I think they're going to win. I think Grizzlies are just too banged up without Jaren Jackson Jr. I think they will, at least make it a competition for sure, just of how competitive Ja is. And I think, they really won that game against the Bucks yesterday, mainly because of, like what I said in the podcast earlier with Taylor Jenkins and Mike Budenholzer's relationship. That's just speculation, so I guess nobody knows about that for sure. But yeah, Damian Lillard is an absolute man. he, like, last night, the Nets were really doubling him as soon as he crossed half court, trying to get the ball out of his hands. And as soon as he would get any sort of an open look at the basket, it really didn't seem like it mattered how far away from the hoop he was. He was just taking it. Like, if he stepped foot on the logo, he was looking for a shot. And, he scored 42 last night. He just came off of a 51 and a 51 and a 61 point game outings. So, he's on an absolute tear right now, willing his team into the playoffs. CJ has been playing with a fractured vertebrae, trying to get into the playoffs as well. So, obviously these guys are making sacrifices, really trying to do all they can. I don't think that CJ McCollum injury is as serious as it sounds. I do watch this guy on YouTube named Brian Suterer, who he's a sports doctor, breaks down sports injuries in videos, and he made a whole video about McCollum's injury and about how it's not as bad as it sounds. It's just a little fracture in a little bone that protrudes off of the side of the lumbar 3 vertebrae column. And I don't know if I phrased all that right, but apparently there's no structural or functionality issues with the injury. It's really just the pain management that is the issue. So he's just playing through a lot of pain right now. But still, that is really inspiring to see this Blazers performance. Really just going at it, getting into that playoff contention and having that advantage for the games this weekend. But yeah, and I think, the Nets really had no reason to win this game, to try to win this game, in terms of, their motivation as a team as a whole. But, I think that what we did see last night was a lot of players trying to prove themselves. There's players like Tyler Johnson, who, literally just got signed for this empty-handed Nets squad, trying to get into the bubble, or trying to bring a team into the bubble. He has his career on the line. He's trying to prove himself, as well as Jared Allen kind of, trying to show off, prove why he should be starting center on this team when DeAndre Jordan is healthy. Karis LeVert, cementing himself as an option on offense for this Nets team moving forward. Just a lot of those guys trying to prove their worth. And also Jacque Vaughn, the interim head coach, after Kenny Atkinson got relieved from his duties back in March, I think. He's one of those options that they're going to be looking at for head coach. His name is not really talked about, I don't think, at least from what I've heard. People talk about a lot more of like Ty Lue and Jason Kidd. But, so he's trying to prove his worth as well, trying to, make a statement, make a case for himself being that head coach moving forward, or, a head coach somewhere else as well, because the Bulls actually just fired. I woke up this morning to this news of them firing Jim Boylan. So there's going to be head coaching jobs available this weird offseason. So a lot of those guys having, individual things to prove and really just playing competitively or trying to win that game really made it close. It was kind of nerve-wracking how it came down to that final possession where Karis LeVert could have just ended their entire season with that final shot. And then Spurs losing to the Jazz last night, the 22 season streak of playoff appearances that was ended for Coach Popovich and the Spurs. I saw a post on The Score, which is a sports app that I have for sports news and stuff, that had this article that was paying tribute to their whole streak and all that stuff, and that was really cool to see. Really kind of somewhat of an end to one of the greatest sports dynasties that we've seen in a long time. I know the dynasty has been done for a while, but them as a perennial playoff team is just kind of a little bit of a ceremonial end to that Spurs team. So that was sad to see as well. And then obviously the Suns beating the Mavericks without Porzingis last night, and them going 8-0 in this bubble. Devin Booker, on a tear. I don't think it's really bad news for Suns fans. I think everybody agrees that we would like to have had Blazers Suns in the playoff or in the play-in games. That probably would have been the most entertaining and the best storyline, because Memphis hasn't really performed well in this bubble, and the Suns have been amazing. They went 8-0. They did everything they could. So that would have been more entertaining, definitely, for sure. But I guess that's just the way it had to go. But, I think that Suns fans shouldn't be too upset, because this team's really looking good moving forward. I think that Suns are really kind of starting to come into their own. They've been looked at as a team for the past few seasons as kind of having a bright future, but never really putting it together yet. And I think that you're starting to see them start to put it together, have some competent roster organization around Devin Booker. DeAndre Ayton starting to come into his own. Really playing defense at a much higher level this season, kind of playing really similarly to Yusuf Nurkic, I would kind of compare him to, just seems like a really competent big man that's making the smart play a lot, getting a lot of rebounds, just being a force to be reckoned with inside. If he can be, that moving forward and continue to grow in that realm, that's going to be huge for them and a great pairing along with Devin Booker. Ricky Rubio has been a great facilitator for this Suns team. Devin Booker back in college was much more of an off-ball threat. He never really performed with the ball in his hands, so he's been one of the wildest NBA tales in history, I think, going from being somebody who's playing off the ball, in the corner and stuff like that and cutting in college to somebody who has the ball in his hands all the time his first few seasons in the NBA and scoring 71 points in a game when he was like 21, 22, something like that, and really being one of the best ISO scorers in the league. But this season, I think what's really unlocked that Suns offense, part of it was having a facilitator like Rubio that can allow Booker to play off the ball like he did in college, because that's a whole nother side, a whole nother dimension of his skill set that has really been unlocked this season. Having the option of him being able to play on ball or off ball has been huge. And then also Kelly Oubre, the off-ball threat that he's been this season as well, hitting threes at a decent clip and being a slashing, cutting guard forward, really good, valuable player for them. And Cam Johnson outperforming what everybody thought he was going to do this season. Everybody was kind of making fun of that pick, him being picked 11th. I think in hindsight, it still was kind of a weird placement, but they picked him for his shooting ability, I believe, and also his age and maturity. So, and he's proved a lot of people wrong who thought, since his hip surgery a couple of years ago, he wouldn't be very mobile on defense and stuff like that. He really has proved those people wrong and been a valuable rotation piece for this team. Dario Saric, Frank Kaminsky, Aaron Baines have all stepped up huge in this season, while all these players like DeAndre Ayton and people who were missing time. Javon Carter's been a good backup point guard. Cameron Payne, who they just signed to come into the bubble, was in the G League a couple years ago, kind of bounced all over, was looked at as a bust. He was a higher draft pick several seasons ago. Is really kind of having his own little renaissance in a way in the bubble. He's been playing really good backup point guard minutes. So yeah, all that stuff. There's a lot of things to be happy about if you're a Suns fan right now. So don't worry too much about missing the playoffs. You've got a good future going in front of you. And and especially if the NBA listens to my last podcast episode and wants to reform the conference format that they do and instead just do 1 through 16 seeding in the playoffs and basically eliminate conferences, that's even better for the Suns, because the only downside really with the Suns' bright future is there's a lot of teams that have a good future going forward in this Western Conference, like the Pelicans and the Grizzlies and even like the Kings, Denver, Utah, all those teams. Clippers still having the guys that they have, and of course the Thunder is probably number one on that list that I didn't even mention. But and there's only 8 playoff spots every season in each conference, so it just seems a little bit unfair. All these teams having brighter futures than basically everybody in the East. I think there's just more stuff going on in the West, and it would just make it a lot better, provide more parity in the league if it was 1 through 16. But that's I'm going on that rant again. But also another thing I wanted to mention was when I was listening to my friend the Jacob Roth show on YouTube podcast the other day. I listened to it shortly after I recorded on Wednesday, this whole podcast, basically. And I totally forgot to talk about and mention the beef between Dame and the Clippers players from when he missed those 2 game-winning free throws the other day against the Clippers. I actually saw that on my way to Orlando in the Atlanta airport. We only had about an hour layover between flights, and sitting at our gate, that game was actually playing, and I got to see the last 5 minutes of the game. So that was cool how that ended up, that I got to see it. But yeah, I was really surprised. When he started shooting the free throws, I was like, this is easy. Dame's like a 90% free throw shooter. He's putting this away. He missed the first one. I was shocked, and I was like, there's no way he's missing the second one. He missed both of them pretty bad. They both hit the front of the rim. It really, I just feel like nerves, I guess, just gets to the best of us even. But and then it showed Patrick Beverley and Marcus Morris on the sideline while JaMychal Green was shooting those free throws the next possession after, they intentionally fouled and really put the game away with that. But it showed, Patrick Beverley and Marcus Morris laughing and messing around on the bench after Dame missed both those free throws, kind of taunting him. Patrick Beverley did the whole Dame time gesture and was laughing and stuff, which, that's just kind of their personalities. They're kind of, those trolls with doing stuff like that. But one thing I didn't even think about, which my friend Jacob brought up in his podcast, was that Patrick Beverley went on the JJ Redick podcast not that long ago and said that Dame is the hardest player for him to guard, and was saying all these nice things about Damian Lillard and how great of a player he is. and how underrated he is and stuff like that. And like, I remember that episode, but I totally forgot about it. Didn't even think about it during all this beef and stuff. I didn't think about like the previous history between Pat Bev and Dame, other than when Damian Lillard hit that series winning 3 several seasons ago, back in like 2014, 2015, something like that, against the Rockets in the first round. So that, that was the only thing I really thought of, because Damian Lillard mentioned that post game. He said, I sent Pat Bev home before, and I sent Paul George home last season. He hit that 3 over Paul George from midcourt just last season on that famous shot to end the series against the Thunder. And what, a lot of people credit that shot with the destruction of the Thunder's franchise and them blowing it up, trading Paul George and Russell Westbrook, which has turned out really good for them, in my opinion. But some people say that shot is really what sealed the deal with that, made Sam Presti go home and cry and decide to blow everything up. But after that series last season, Paul George said post-game, like, that's a bad shot. I don't care what anybody says, that's a bad shot. Talking about Damian Lillard hoisting it up from half court. And Yusuf Nurkic post-game a couple of games ago kind of mocked that a little bit. He was asked about how their team's doing, and it's, some vague question. I don't really remember what it was. But he went on to answer, like, Dame's been taking a bunch of bad shots for us. He's taking a bunch of bad shots, but lucky for us, he's making most of them. So I thought that was funny. But another thing with Pat Bev, though, like how he talked up Damian Lillard on the JJ Redick podcast recently, I also remember in the playoffs last season, when right before the Western Conference Finals started between the Blazers and the Warriors, Pat Bev was interviewed somewhere, I don't remember by who, but I remember him talking about Damian Lillard being underrated in comparison to Steph, and how the Warriors system is really what unlocks how good of a player Steph is. And he basically said that if you put Dame in that Warriors system instead of Steph, you'll see similar results. Like, that Dame is as good of a point guard as Stephen Curry is, basically, is how he said it. And that was last season. And what Jacob said in his podcast just reminded me of that. I totally forgot about that as well. But I guess, those are 2 really big examples of Patrick Beverley talking up and really respecting Damian Lillard. So it was kind of funny to see him taunting him, and then them kind of going at it afterwards on Twitter. I believe Paul George chimed in on Twitter saying something about Damian Lillard, how he's going to send him home this year instead of, being sent home by him like he has been in the past. And then Patrick Beverley chimed in with like Cancun on 3, suggesting that Portland is going on vacation now. They're not going to be in the bubble anymore. And then Damian Lillard responded with just what probably is the best response possible, by saying, keep changing teams, or keep switching teams, running from that grind. You boys is chumps. Basically, I'm paraphrasing, I think, a little bit. I don't know if that was exact, but yeah. So, just telling Paul George, who is on his 3rd team now, who left after kind of being stuck in that first round cycle the last several seasons with Indiana, and then the last 2 seasons with the Thunder as well, trying to get a change in scenery, running from that grind, in Damian Lillard's words. I thought it was pretty clever and funny, kind of a really good diss back at him. But I respect both these players. I like both of them. I admire both of their games. So I'm not really picking a side totally, other than I think Dame has showed up quite a bit more in bigger moments than Paul George has in his playoff history. But so I think he has a little bit more credibility. But I just thought that little bit of bubble beef was funny and worth talking about. But yeah. And then, yeah, so all the playoff matchups for the first round are locked in place now, I believe. And so look forward to next episode. I'll be recording soon after I upload this episode. I'll probably start working on it really soon. I'll be talking about I'll be talking about first round matchups, which was an episode that I've been talking about doing for a while now. And then also another episode that I've been talking about since really I think the first episode I ever recorded, which was the dark horse contenders. I'm going to go through like basically a ranking. I'll rank all of my contenders in order of how likely I think they are to win the championship. I'm just going to go through all the teams in the playoffs and rank them 1 to 16. So yeah, look forward to that. But yeah, so I guess now I'll let you get back to what little of this podcast you have left. I think it's just like a minute of a little bit of an outro. So I'll let you guys get back to that. If you like the podcast, please press like on YouTube and consider following the channel. If you're listening on Spotify, please consider following the feed. If this is your first time listening, welcome, and thank you for listening. If you liked it at all, if you're curious at all, or if you're interested in what I've had to say and what I've had to talk about, and listening to me talk about NBA basketball at all, be sure to stay alert and click that notification bell and listen to new episodes when they come out. Any support that you guys can give me just by listening to it and commenting, or whatever, just listening to it, is huge. So, and I'm really thankful for that. This has become a little bit of a hobby of mine that I would love to see go further than that, but obviously big dreams. But yeah, as always, thank you guys for listening, and I'll talk to you guys next time.